And we are live. Okay, so today I'm super excited to have Max here. And Max is the founder and CEO of 21.finance. And I'm very excited to have you here. That we finally made it after back and forth. And I'm so happy that we have some time. I know it's been a super busy time for you. So I'm very excited to have a little bit of space today to have this conversation. So Max, thank you so much for being here. Maybe you want to say a few words about yourself, and then we're going to dive right into the questions.
Yeah, with pleasure. Thank you, Daniel, for having me today. It's maybe a few words about myself. My name is Max Heinzle. I'm the founder and CEO of 21.finance. We are fintech based out of Liechtenstein, founded actually in 2017. And some of you might have heard about our latest project. So we're in the process of applying and filing for the application for the first European DLT-based trading and settlement system. And about myself, my background is really in banking and capital markets. I've been working for the last 10 years in fintech now, was part of a project in Germany for the first securities-based crowd investing platform. And pleasure to be here, and thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here, Max. So let's dive right in. Now, first, I want to talk a little bit about you as a person, as a human being. So the first thing I'm really curious about is if you had to sum up your essence in just one word, what would that word be and why?
Yeah, one word is the essence in one word is a difficult task, I believe. But I think that because there are a couple of characteristics I think could sum up the essence. But I think probably if I had to choose for one, then it would be probably tenacity or also determination when it comes to being innovative in general and being curious about how we can go about doing things today as opposed to how they can be done in a better way tomorrow. One thing is identifying and being curious. The other one is to actually then also have the determination and also the tenacity, I believe. So, yeah.
They go very well together, these two words. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, now I want to talk a little bit about success, but more specifically about your personal take on success. So if you had to define success for yourself, like as a very personal thing for you, how would you define success, or how do you define success?
Yeah, like you said, Daniel, I think, success is that's a very individual thing. Like it's a question of, generally speaking, success is an achievement of a goal or a set of goal that you or myself have set out for ourselves. And there are various criteria, I believe, that you can measure success by. So, whether it is often the case that people talk about financial wealth being a criteria for success, or social statuses, personal happiness, or also just the fulfillment of some form of purpose. So in essence, I think to sum it up, success can be based on various components. And for me, it's actually also exactly that. It is if you so want, the symbiosis of things coming together. Yeah, and that then in essence makes the success. And whether that is on a personal level or whether it is in the business in the space of business, yeah.
Thanks for sharing your take on that. Appreciate that. Now, one more thing I want to talk about a little bit is decisions, especially difficult decisions. If you look back on your career and maybe on your company as well, or previous companies, what if you had to point out maybe one or maybe several, but what is one of the most difficult decisions that you ever had to make?
Yeah, having to basically start from the beginning again. When you've built something that you in the past believed in strongly, and you come to understand that the way you've gone about developing a solution does not show or does not deliver on the expected results. So that is tough to let go of something that you firmly believed in the past. And so I think, again, also here, there are many difficult questions in life that one is facing, and that challenge you to answer whether you really deeply have done your introspection and considered the complexity of what those decisions actually lead to. And sometimes they are actually also contradicting with values, right? And so there is, again, kind of like also with the question of success, I feel that there is not that one single question, but but there are many difficult questions in life. And I think what has probably also gotten me to the stage where I'm at today is that in essence I try to face those difficult situations and not run away from them, because not always but often they catch up with you again. And if I had to make a decision on what one of the most difficult decisions for me was surely the fact that we had invested time and money into a product, and we came to understand that the way that we had gone about building and developing the product was not going to lead us any further to the expected success. So that was a tough decision.
Thanks for sharing. It's really interesting, like you mentioned, like letting go being like a very challenging or difficult decision. So interesting. Like I see that often, especially in the corporate venturing space or in any kind of space where you like, especially corporations who very often have the resources to invest maybe too much into building things. And then, once they're invested, or once basically, I guess, people are invested, right, into a solution or into something, maybe an app, a product, whatever it may be, it's incredibly difficult to let go. It's so much easier to let go before there is a product, before there is something tangible. Afterwards, there's so much emotional attachment, and it's sometimes mind-blowing to me how much effort goes into keeping something alive that should have been dead for years.
Yeah.
Just for so many personal, egoistic reasons, and just like, it's fascinating. It's got nothing to do with market dynamics or with actual common sense or with logic. It's just the emotional attachment of people to themselves, but also to the product. So I really appreciate sharing the letting go part. Something I see so often as being so difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now I want to talk a little bit more about the company. So can you tell us a little bit more about 21 Finance? I talked to Sina a couple of months ago. So
well, you actually, that confusion happens quite some time. You're not the first person to mix it up. So you wanted me to tell you a bit about what we are doing in 21st Finance?
Yeah, exactly. So tell us a little bit more about what you guys are doing, and also kind of like what's the challenge you guys are solving? What's the challenge you guys are solving?
So in essence, we are strongly, as we are, strong believers in, tokenized financial instruments, tokenized investment products. And given that we believe that the evolution of capital markets is actually in the making, we have built out like a product and service suite to service business clients that are interested to start engaging in this space. So we offer ranging from white labeled SaaS solutions to like an API platform for digital distribution, in order to enable our business clients to not only tokenize, issue, and distribute tokenized forms of financial instruments or assets, but also to get them listed to a much broader audience, and also distributed through, if you so want, a decentralized distribution network. So in addition to that, we are in the process of licensing for the first, if you so want, DLT-based trading and settlement system in Europe under the new EU pilot regime, which has just come into effect actually as of the 23rd of March. So we are in the process of developing this, if you so want, trading and settlement engine, which in the next step shall drive liquidity into tokenized assets, and that's what we are that's the mission that we have set out and that we are pursuing at 21.finance. So if you so want, it's a fully in itself integrated product suite that, alongside the value chain from the point of issuing tokenized offerings to the point of having them admitted to trading and publicly available on a secondary market venue.
Thanks for sharing. Now I want to dive a little bit more into the space, because like I'm a big believer that, I'm all for mass adoption when it comes to blockchain and all the technologies that are built on top of that. And I think we have a long way to go. And I believe there's many reasons, but I also believe one reason is because of the actual experience part. The actual, and I've not been in this space as long as you are. I've been in this space for about 2 years or so, but I've been experimenting very intensely over the past 2 years, and it's an incredible maze sometimes, and it's just very different from anything that I've experienced. Maybe it's a little closer to remembering using the internet for the first time. Maybe it's a little closer to that, but that memory is so long ago that it's difficult for me to compare it today. So I'm curious, first, I'm curious on your take of mass adoption. We can talk about tokenization specifically, because that's something I'm incredibly interested in when it comes to physical assets, digital assets. I know there's a lot of regulatory constraints that come with it, but eventually, at some point, I'm pretty sure these things will be figured out. So I'm really curious to have your take on what does it take for tokenization to be adopted by the masses, not only B2C, but also B2B, basically by companies tokenizing things, and by customers and consumers actually getting involved in tokenized assets and digital assets. I'm curious to have your take on that.
So again, I think there are multiple aspects to that equation, but one formula that I like to use is, and I think just looking back at what has happened over the last decade, when looking at like distributed ledger technology, the use cases that we've seen, been created in the DeFi space. One thing that we always, were convinced of, that is critical for, if you so want, for this tokenization or global tokenized assets market to break out, and looking also at the studies and the estimations from very large research institutes, they are talking about this market growing into the trillions already in the next couple of years, right? And in order for this adoption to happen, you obviously need infrastructure. So you need a working infrastructure. Now, with what we've seen with Switzerland, for example, or also Liechtenstein, where we are headquartered, but also in Germany. So Europe, the Central European part, for example, they've been very progressive. They've been very progressive when it came to regulating, as opposed to in other fields. I would even go so far when we are talking to investors. I tell them, look at how Europe has taken the lead globally in terms of creating a regulatory framework. And I think that's very important for institutional adoption. For the larger, the key players to enter into the industry and themselves to start becoming actively in setting up and integrating solutions in order to tap this new type of business and industry. So that's I think one of the critical parts. Regulation, over-regulating can obviously be hindering for business, but it can actually also be essential for business to actually start happening. And since crypto as an asset class was actually induced by the masses and is brought to the institutions by the adoption that came from retail, it's questionable as to whether that would work with something such as security tokens. Probably not really, because if you look at the aspects that come with dealing with security tokens, that can have serious charges that result from not going about doing this in a regulatory compliant form and manner. We know about these cases, whether it's in the US with the SEC, or also examples in Switzerland and Europe for sure. So that's one side, right? So you have like regulation, and you have the infrastructure in order for, so to say, the highways to be built, in order for the traffic to actually be happening there. And the other side is like the mass adoption that you were talking about, in terms of what is the UX, what is the UI, how technically savvy do I really need to be? And I think the answer there is that, in terms of what the challenges were that the market is always talking about, in terms of taking self-custody, in regards to ensuring and safekeeping your own private key, that brings a certain technical savviness and understanding of how things work to the table. But the reality is, I think that we are already showing and proving today that there is no form of technical further knowledge that users require, and the UX and UI side of things can be solved in a very comparable way to how it is already done today, that people are used to, when it comes to the journeys of, say, opening a custodial, non-custodial wallet, to also investing in tokenized instruments seamlessly, where we are working towards what we already see today in online shopping, to make investing as easy as online shopping, like one-click experiences. And again, I think there are not many points in regards to that I see as hindering for that adoption to be happening.
Thanks for sharing. I want to stay a little bit more on that one, because I'm curious on your take, like why it's not happening faster. Maybe it doesn't have to happen faster, I don't know, but I'm just curious. Like there's a couple of nuances that I've experienced in the past, and one of the nuances is that in the past, these solutions have not been built for non-crypto people. They've been built for purely innovators and early adopters, and nobody else whatsoever. And that was the community, and maybe still is the community today, and maybe almost nobody else. So that's kind of a flavor or nuance that I've tasted, I feel. So the baseline has often been, well, it's okay, right? As long as it works for the geeky group who really wants to engage and directly transact on the blockchain, that's fine. That's like a little bit of a nuance. And the other nuance is like, well, first the highways need to be built, right? Before you can make them more smooth and, build more, I don't know, intersections and, all these kinds of things. That's another nuance. So I'm curious on your take, like, why do you feel, and another, maybe a third one is like, we've only been around for 12 years, right? Or for 10 years. That's another one. So I'm curious, like, on your take, are these the reasons? Is one of those the reasons? Is there something else? What's your take?
So I think that one needs to really distinguish when looking at cryptocurrencies and the adoption of crypto, and which as opposed to, say, the adoption of tokenized real world assets, tokenized securities, and what has happened there. And again, when going back to my point from earlier, when we're talking about infrastructure, one, like my conviction, and I believe a lot of people in the industry are also share that opinion that in order for security tokens or real world or real world assets that are being transacted in a tokenized form, so smart contract based, you need infrastructure that is critical, such as like a regulated trading venue. You need to drive liquidity into these products, right? We've seen this in the crypto space with all the, if you so want, unregulated crypto exchanges popping out in the early stages. We've seen what the results and effects were of the space being, say, only partially regulated in parts of the world. Yeah, we've seen also the shift that has created. We've seen the defaults that have that this has resulted in. When it comes to real world assets, we are in regulated financial services industry. So if you look at the traction that the industry has proven, if you look at the accessibility that is today given to if you look at the lower hanging fruits, why would you, one of the key questions that I always raise is, why would you wrap something in a token that has already been wrapped, by the means of securitization? So one of the core questions that we've addressed in the past is, in order for this new technology to deliver on efficiency gains, on being more cost efficient, being requiring less manual intervention, having higher levels of automation, and so on and so forth. In order for this to happen, you need to have the regulators set out the rules and also enable for us as providers to leverage what DLT has to offer. That's why I'm personally excited and believe that the evolution is in the making. We've seen a lot of, say, tokenization of securities that was taking place in a very, if you so want, in a very basic form and manner, kind of taking what we have in today's world, transferring it onto another technology, but not really unleashing the potential or the fury that such technology can offer. And also in particular, right, take as an example the fact that, for crypto natives, it's normal to be able to take self-custody. But how would you in today's world take self-custody of your securities? How would you actually circumvent a broker, circumvent a bank? Not saying that you have to, but if you wanted to. And who are the participants in regulated traditional capital markets? What about what about democratization? What about inclusion? What about markets that are more efficient? And I think that's again something that can only start happening if the regulators step up, if they have an understanding of what technology can actually do, if they see the advantages, for example, of disintermediating processes. Yeah. By the way, just to make this clear, we also work with intermediaries. So we're still working with banks. We're still working with brokers. We're still working with the likes of the traditional types of players that are out there. But it just opens a new field of possibilities, and it basically will allow you and me to connect our wallet and fire away on executing an order on a secondary market venue, where in today's world and time you could never do that. And that's why I think it is going towards this being facilitating processes to an extent that will bring huge advantages to capital markets.
Thanks for sharing. Yeah, thanks for sharing that perspective, especially specifically on tokenization and security tokens specifically. I really appreciate that, especially when it comes to regulation. It's a different type of flavor to the space for sure. Now, one more thing I'm super curious about is, you mentioned before, when we talked about decisions, right? You mentioned the product didn't fly, need to detach, need to let go. Now I'm
so
curious.
We had actually two things. Sorry to jump in here. We had, not only did we have what I mentioned earlier, but we also had the fact that we launched a B2C marketplace at a time and being where we literally saw that, that the adoption, that the market was not ready for it yet. And if you take, and it's, by the way, it's not the first time that this has happened to me. So I was also involved as a co-founder as a co-founder in another tech project where, again, the solution found adoption only years later. So at the time being, we were too early for the market. The market was not ready yet. And so one thing can be that you need to pivot your business model, and say, you know what, we've created actually a working, functionable solution. It's regulatory compliant or whatever. It fulfills like the requirements. But it was the case that we had more traction coming from companies. So basically, we started thinking about, why don't we offer what we've developed as a B2B solution, right? And looking back at the history of 21st Finance, and sharing that openly also with the founders and likes that are out there that are going through similar challenges. Just when you come to understand that something is not working or not fitting in the way that you were hoping for it to fit, then don't be afraid to make gutsy decisions, and also not hold on for too long. I mean, obviously, having done your research and analysis on the situation. And so in our case, it was not only the pivoting from B2C to B2B, but we also had worked in the past on a different technological setup, which we thought was the right way to go in the beginning. We thought it would save us time and money, which in essence turned out that that was, that those were false hopes, that we could do better. And also that those are decisions that throw you back in time, and are potentially in the short run a lot more costly, but in the long run they will save you a lot of money, they will save you a lot of time, and they will make you a lot more agile on those iterations with clients, on the feedback loops that you're getting, in order to even get your product to a much better product market fit.
Yeah, I want to stay on that topic for a second, because that's really something that I'm very curious about on the product market fit. And you mentioned before, when something doesn't work or something doesn't fly, to move on. But how do you know that it doesn't work? Like, when and how? Is there a moment in time? Is there specific measurement that you can use? Is it basically just clients or customers saying no to, like, that's not it, right? I mean, when do you know that you need to move on? How do you know?
So and I mean, just from my personal experience, because I think you already partially answered. So how do you find product market fit, right? And there's lots of literature out on that, but breaking it down to the core points, what I always have, if you so want, as my set of rules that I stick to, is obviously you're identifying problems, right? You're understanding the problem that you're trying to solve and how that affects your target market and your target clients, right? And the research that you do, I've learned in the past that you always need to try and do this research, not to or in other words, you need to try and speak to your potential clients. A lot of people always stress that. That's critical, because they will bring up questions that you cannot think of by yourself. So that's critical, right? And then you develop, up to the point where you develop that solution of yours, you create a solution that addresses the identified problem or problems that we talked about earlier, and obviously needs to be in some form of unique or specially valuable way that you're doing that, right? The differentiating factor. And then you need to test the solution, right? So you're testing the solution, you get to the point of where you have an MVP and you're onboarding clients. So another good friend of mine who's a founder himself, he's the best example of that. I think if you were to ask him, he had onboarded already 80 clients, Yeah, but he was still continuously, taking on the feedback and, calming or asking potential clients to be patient, that features will be still rolled out that are still missing, and thank you for the feedback, and so on and so forth. And in the end, you need to measure the traction, right? Like you said earlier, Daniel, measure the traction by tracking what? Like sales success? Like how easy is it for you? How convincing is your, value proposition then in talks when, when you're converting leads into prospects, into contracts? And also tracking user engagement. So one thing is to sign contracts, but the other one is, are the products actually really, delivering on what, the expectations are of our business clients or of your clients in general? And then to strongly focus on improving the engagement, yeah, and also strongly focusing on improving retention, yeah, and being able to then iterate, use that customer feedback, and work with those metrics that you've defined, because there is not one set of metrics. It comes down to, you will always find easily core metrics you can add to that. So you iterate and you improve your solution continuously. Yeah, you continuously improve also the product until you achieve an even better market fit. And when you've done that, then you scale, right? So then you come to the point of where you focus on scaling your product, and in order to reach a larger market, in order to reach in order to reach a larger market.
Thanks for sharing. It's really like what I get from you is like it's a combination of different things. Like one is, the customer feedback and iterating on that, right? The other one is like the sales success. Like, you go out, you talk to customers, and how difficult is it to convince them and to communicate, and for them to understand what this is all about, why it's beneficial, like how difficult is that, and how is the engagement afterwards, right? How is the delivery on the expectations, like, and there's these are all moving parts at the same time, like in the same construct, right? So
Correct.
That's probably what makes it so difficult.
I think that Daniel, well said. It is definitely a challenging task, and I think also, like a lot of things, there is not that one single set way of going about doing it, but there are some important points to consider, and that I think, are a great guideline. And one thing is obviously in the early stages, like in the seed stage of the startup, where you need that MVP, right? And you need that MVP to have a certain set, you need it to do the job already, right, in order to solve that issue or problem of the client of yours. But from that point onwards, achieving product market fit is continuously an ongoing process. So you could say, you're trying to do this in order to get things going, but then from the get-go, it requires you continuously to iterate and improve, and it's not a one-time event. It's rather like a state of continuous improvement and growth.
Yeah, it's also funny, like, just to stay on that for a little bit longer, because I find it so fascinating. It's also like, what is the product, right? Because like very often when we work with we work with clients on product market fit, and they don't have a digital product yet, but they have an idea or an assumption or whatever. Well, we don't build the product, right? That would be insane from our perspective. What we create is a value proposition, right? And then we test that value proposition. If the value proposition is the product, at that stage. And only when that value proposition, or those how many iterations and variations and test results and whatever, only when there is an actual market fit, right, we move on to the next stage. And maybe it's a landing page then, and maybe it's a prototype afterwards, and maybe it's an MVP then, and whatever. So I think the product is also something that changes and can be something very, very different. And I think another interesting twist is also like, often what I at least meet is like, companies have built a product that they hoped, would fly, and now it's out and it's done, like it's final, you know, it's all done, right? It's done, it's out there, and now it's like, oh, nobody wants it. Like, or
Yeah.
like, okay, they don't understand them. Clients just don't understand the value of this product, right? They don't get it, and you know, it doesn't fly, whatever. It's
So
interesting because, yeah, sometimes it's like, maybe it's not the actual full thing that you've built that's interesting. Maybe it's only one little thing, but then how you go about that process may lead you to a destination of like, let's kill it because nobody really wants it, or to, that little thing in here is actually what these clients want. Or maybe, oh, did we actually go after the right market? So there's so many variables, right?
so that's again, how can you find out? Is by not sitting in, you know, your office and building something to force that onto the market, which again, there are examples that has also worked, yeah, and worked very successfully. But to, in at least in our case, to go into the conversations and make sure that you get that, you and you know, one other thing that you mentioned, I think, is how do you communicate the value proposition? How do you go about presenting what, you know, value you can create and which problems you can solve? So also for us, that has been an iterative process. We've just rebranded end of last year. We've just launched a new website. We've, you know, have this new product family and branding for the products. We started to describe them in a different way because we've come to understand better how our clients are reading, you know, and understanding the information that we are providing. Some of what we thought in the past has been clear to us in the way that we're explaining it, has been misleading for our clients, has been actually causing different, you know, triggering different thoughts. And so this is something that in essence you need to get into the nitty and gritty. Yeah, and you need to, like I said earlier, it's an ongoing process. It's not solved, you know, normally it's not solved in one go. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And just like one last thing on that, to me, it's also fascinating how different people with different DNAs and different backgrounds and different operating systems go about this. Like, you know, because I think maybe the more business-minded people can easily think about it of like, that's what we want to communicate. You know, this is the value proposition that we want to communicate, right?
Yeah.
Because then we can be proud of it, but maybe nobody cares. But you know, we do, right? And then there's maybe more the, you know, the psychologists or the researchers or the user experience people or the customer experience people who have that ingrained, hopefully, right, in their operating system to actually go from the exact opposite, maybe even completely forgetting or ignoring the business side and purely being curious and trying to understand the user and the customer and things like that. And now the funny thing is that also doesn't work in a vacuum, right? Because then you extract the insights and maybe even build something, but then at some point you go like, so how do I monetize that now? Right? So I think that's where this beauty of these different worlds colliding and actually working hand in hand together comes in. Because if you take the best of these both worlds and put them together, I think you have an amazing recipe for success. But as in a vacuum, that's at least what I've experienced over the past many years. In a vacuum, it's very, very difficult.
Yeah. 100% agree with what you said, Daniel.
Last question I have for you, Max, and then we're going to wrap up. Let's look into the future. Let's say you're 80 years old now and you look back at your life and everything that has happened, you know, and how the world has changed, maybe the world of finance, maybe the world in general. If you look back at that point in time, what would you like to see in the world to be changed? Either in the world of finance, in the world in general. What is it that you would love to see changed at that point looking back?
Let me focus on capital markets there, because there are other experts for all the other issues that we are facing and challenges that are coming at us. Surely the world needs some important changes, and you know that. But if we are you know, looking at capital markets, and I think looking back in the future, I would like to see the capital markets, and these are some buzzwords, but I sincerely mean them. I hope that capital markets are a lot more accessible than they are today, a lot more transparent than they are today, a lot more inclusive than they are today, a lot more efficient than they are today. So if, just those four things could, be the case, then I think that makes for a big difference. That's at least something that I'm convinced of that will be the case in the future. One thing that personally, and looking back at also, my engagement in the past, I studied in Switzerland. I went to school. I actually graduated also in Switzerland, and I worked when I was 19 and started studying in the French part of Switzerland. I started the Institute for Value-Based Enterprise together with Hans-Ulrich Pestalozzi in the time back then. For us and for me personally, I hope that we come back to also a more value-based way of working. Yeah, I think that I'm a bit concerned and worried about, but we're not going to stop at what the impact is of all the things that are going on in terms of the digitization that is happening, and the fact that it, at least from my subjective point of view, feels that some of the values are being, less considered or respected in the way that we go about doing business. And I would hope that looking back in the future, I would hope that we can see that this is a trend that we are coming, that is not going downwards anymore, but actually that we are making progress to the better. Yeah, and having said that, as we know, capital markets play a critical role on how things function on our planet. So, yeah, I think it's about time, as blockchain and DLT has proven, that this leads to the world becoming a better place. Technology to make our world a better place. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing this, Max, and really finishing on this inspiring note. To me, it's the perfect tie-in with the vision that you have for the company into the future of capital markets and basically a more equalized world at the end of the day. It's interesting, like when I talk to people like, Frederick Cardano or many other people in the blockchain and the crypto and space, very often they refer to the original purpose of blockchain, the original vision of the technology. And it has a lot to do with that. And it's a beautiful loop. So thank you so much, Max, for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. All the best.